Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Reduced because we can go median. That's what we said. We could match, do that.
With an echo, yes.
That's what they
That's
were.
the original, so I think it
Who's left?
Yeah, it was Jesse.
Yeah.
sorry.
Got us.
That's me.
He was rocking out. Yeah, it was last before he
Okay.
We took out
I
165.
was like, Tyler, I'd be late. Yeah, well, we need.
Yep.
Yeah.
Money on. I think it's cleaner.
A weird quorum count still.
Still, we can get on to ours, this
Keep
one.
We're live now.
So it comes out already.
For anyone who's
I might see.
tuning in and standing by, we're hoping that Mike Riley is going to join us real soon for quorum, and then we'll get going.
To shift. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
The first three items, we don't need quorum for the first three items, right?
Right.
How long?
Okay.
A couple minutes.
Yeah, let's wait a couple.
Oh, there we go.
Perfect.
Oh, you want to sit here? Here.
Yeah.
I'm fine. You sure?
Yeah.
I just moved down here. Nobody's here. I agree, Mike. Good.
Right. Go ahead and get started. So, hi, everyone. I'm Phil Chang, Vice Chair of MPO Policy Board, calling this meeting to order. Let's go ahead and go around the table, do some introductions. All right.
Kelly Kennedy with the Bend MPO.
Andrea Napoli, Bend MPO.
Jesse Thomas, City of Bend.
Janet Ruby, City of Bend Transportation.
Derek Opbauer, City of Bend.
Brian Potwin, Commute Options.
Mike Riley, Bend City Council, MPO member.
Rick Bryant, issue through Woods.
Omar Med, ODOT.
Tyler Deakey, MPO staff.
Okay, and then online, maybe I could just call people in order, or call out in order, and then you could introduce yourselves. Let's do Ariel, Bob, and Chris.
Ariel Mendez, Bend City Council and MPO Policy Board Member, Chair, actually. Thank you for chairing today, Commissioner Chang.
My pleasure.
Bob Townsend, Cascades East Transit Director. Chris Doty, Deschutes County Road Department.
And everyone else listed there is here.
Yes.
Okay. Done with introductions.
One other person,
Oh,
Commissioner Chang.
Michelle.
Rhodes. Oh, hi. Michelle Rhodes, Bend Lapine School District. Hi, everyone.
Okay, Tyler, you want to take us through the hybrid meeting guidelines?
Yes, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed. And for those online, please use the raised hand function and we will call on you as we move through the meeting. Can move on.
Next on the agenda is our public comment period. Is there anyone present in the room or online who would like to give public comment today? Seeing none, we can move on to item number 4 on our agenda, the meeting minutes. Has anyone reviewed the meeting minutes and would like to make a motion at this point?
I move approval of the minute from the October 17th Policy Board meeting.
Second.
Made and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, calling for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Seeing none, motion passes. And we can move on to item number 5 on our agenda, the State Highway Fund Program Project Funding Awards discussion.
Thank you. You can go to the next slide, Tyler. So for today, I have some background here on this project. So the end of September, that was the application submittal deadline for our SHF program, call for projects for 2025. And we then posted all those applications to our website so that they could be reviewed. At the October TAC meeting, all of the applicants presented their projects. It was a time for the TAC to be able to ask some questions, get more clarity on the projects. And then mid to end of October, staff and 2 TAC representatives reviewed all the applications, scored them against the application criteria, and developed an overall ranking of projects against that criteria. The November 4th TAC meeting, the TAC then developed a recommended list of projects to fund for the policy board. And then today, the board's expected to award funding to selected projects. So because this is a longer agenda item, I wanted to give you a heads up on how this will flow. So we'll start off by going over the applications submitted, really just some brief project descriptions for each one, and then go over the funds originally requested, application criteria and points available, the resultant ranking of the criteria-based scoring for each project, some other factors to consider that aren't necessarily included in the application criteria, the tax recommendation, some updates since the tax recommendation. There are also 2 funding scenarios, and then finally, awarding of funds. So there's 3 slides here. We have 9 project application. Just a note that the Meisner Snow Park Shuttle project is ineligible, so it isn't moving forward in this process. So the first one we'll start with is commute options. They submitted an application for safe routes to school, and this is essentially staff time and materials for bike and pedestrian safety education program, and that includes instruction, events, and administering a volunteer program. And also to note, if you have any questions as we're going through these, all of our applicants are here to provide any more details. Next, Bend Pine Schools submitted an application for pedestrian safety education, safe routes to school program. And that was to purchase 2 pedestrian education mobile kits and fund a half-time Bend Pine School staff position. And on a note here, on November 10th, the applicant had requested to change to commute options delivering the Bend Pine Schools program. Next is also Bend Pine Schools, Bend Traffic Garden. So this
Can we
is,
just ask a
oh
clarification
yeah,
about that one? So does that mean that they're same proposal, same amount of money, although I know later there's an adjustment down of $30,000 for that project?
yeah. So
Still proposing essentially that it be funded at the lower $30,000 level, but rather than hire a staff, they would contract with commute options.
yeah, that's correct.
They're not withdrawing the application.
No, they're not withdrawing the application. And we'll go over that a little bit in more detail later in the presentation, but yes. And the Bend Traffic Garden, so that's design and construction of a miniature streetscape intended for youth safety education. Cascades East Transit, Deschutes River Woods Microtransit Pilot Project. And this is on-demand public transportation to connect into Bend's fixed route service. And the following 5 applications are all from City of Bend. So the first one is travel options assessment, education, and engagement. This is staff time and materials to conduct a campaign to highlight newer multimodal infrastructure projects. And again, keep in mind, this is a brief description. And next, they'll all be sidewalk infill projects. So the first one is on Northeast Sixth Street. And this is 2,700 linear feet of sidewalk infill between North Innes and Northeast Revere Avenue. And that's along a key route and a neighborhood greenway. Next is also City of Bend, Northeast Butler Market. And this is sidewalk infill and an enhanced crossing. So just over 3,700 linear feet of sidewalk infill, new crossing and a pedestrian refuge island, and that's between Northeast Purcell and Northeast Weeping Willow Drive. Next is Northeast Boyd Acres, again, sidewalk infill, just over 3,700 linear feet between Cooley and Double Peaks Road. And then finally, Southeast American Lane, sidewalk infill, 900 linear feet, just south of Reed Market Road. So this slide shows the funds that were originally requested in September. I'm not going to necessarily go through each amount here, but the main point of the slide is to show that we do have pretty significant shortfall. So not all projects are going to be able to. So the application criteria and points available. The policy board this spring made some changes to the application criteria and the points available. But we have criteria around benefiting multiple users. That's the one that gets the highest amount of points, up to 10 points. Criteria around safety, up to 6 points. Increasing system efficiency, up to 6 points. Reducing vehicle miles traveled and emissions, up to 6 points. Advancing equity is also up to 6 points available. And finally, the lowest amount of available points at up to 3 points is cost sharing. So here are the ranking results of the criteria-based scoring. So again, it was staff and 2 TAC members, non-applying TAC members that really dove into each application, reviewing them, scoring them, and ranking them. And they did this was all done individually. You'll see that there are a couple ties there. So if you look at the average rank, there are 2 ties at, between 4th and 5th place, and then 1 2 also at 5th place. And then within the individual scores ranking themselves, there are a couple ties. So score number 1, for example, you'll see that there are 2 4th place rankings and 2 6th place. So what that means is that 7th is the lowest, where if you look at score number 2, there are no ties in there. So the lowest is 9th place. And then score number 3 has 3 3rd place. So again, the lowest rank for score number 3 is 7. There was mostly consistency between all of the scorers. Where there was some inconsistency was mainly between the Safe Routes to Schools programs and the infrastructure, the sidewalk infill. And we met after we scored and ranked to discuss our consistencies and inconsistencies. And what we found is that, it's not a perfect system. There's definitely some subjectivity. One of the scorers tend to score the sidewalk infill higher than they did the programs. And then the two other scorers tend to score the programs higher and the sidewalk infill lower. But in the end, we didn't change anything, and we felt very comfortable with how the average rankings shook out. And it was then the TAC used this as a starting point for developing their funding recommendation. Councilor Mendez?
Yeah, thanks, Andrea. Just wondering, could you explain a little bit, just so we understand how the different criteria were weighted? The traffic garden was scored the lowest among all of the scorers. Was there any particular factor that explained that, or did you get a sense of why that one was so low, just because it's not that it's not a good project, but it sounds like it really didn't meet the criteria that we set out for it.
Yeah, I think, so I know that with that one specifically, there was no match, so that, set it apart from, getting a higher score. There also wasn't necessarily any education programmed with it. So that had resulted in it, being a lower score. And also know that I think, with the programs, the criteria probably is more applicable to, infrastructure or sidewalk infill type or actual infrastructure types of projects than, programs. But I would mainly say that those are the reasons why that one scored lower. There were some, there was an item or a reason why, the TAC didn't necessarily recommend it. It wasn't included in the criteria-based scoring, but that was because it doesn't have a identified location. And the location, it's location dependent on if it's eligible for state or, federal funding.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And I think I'm missing something. So the Northeast Sixth Street sidewalk project ranked pretty high, but these rankings or these recommendations don't allocate any funds for that project.
Yeah, so if we go to
Get
the,
funded somewhere
Yeah,
else
we'll
or something?
get to that.
Okay.
Yeah. So other factors to consider that weren't necessarily included in the criteria-based scoring are readiness of the project. Is the project ready to go? Are there other funding sources that can be used on the project that then would free up these dollars for other projects? And is it an efficient use of funds, or is there an overall need for it? So here's the tax recommendation, and I'll go over each one of these. So commute options, safe routes to school, that was recommended for funding for the full amount. The Bend Schools, say, pedestrian safety education program, that was recommended at the full amount. The Bend Traffic Garden, that was not recommended by the TAC for funding because of the readiness or the lack of a identified location. CET's Chutes River Woods microtransit pilot project, that was recommended for full funding, as was the city's travel options assessment, education and engagement. So the City of Bend Northeast Street sidewalk connection, that scored ranked high. However, it's very likely that that project, because it is such a high priority project for the city, could be funded with city funds. So the TAC then recommended not to fund that project with MPO funds because it would likely get funded with other funds. And similarly for Northeast Butler Market sidewalk connection and crossing, the TAC had recommended that MPO dollars be used for the sidewalk infill portion of that project, but that the crossing portion, the city could likely fund that, especially when it gets out to fiscal year 30. Northeast Boyd Acres, that was recommended for full funding, as was Southeast American Lane sidewalk connection. And then in the end, the TAC could not come to consensus on how to address the remaining $61,000 shortfall. So staff had agreed to meet with applicants individually to see where there could be some room on maybe taking a lesser amount. So here's some updates since the tax recommendation. So as I mentioned previously, Bend Metropolitan Schools requested to change their project to contract with Commute Options to deliver their specific program and delete the half-time Bend Metropolitan School staff position. Additionally, the pedestrian education safety kits could be deleted. There are some available in the area, but they did want to keep some funding to do roundabout add-ons onto those kits. So their updated cost estimate with this is about 30,000 less than their original ask. Some projects with some flexibility in taking some reduced amount of funding. So CET was willing to take less in the second year of funding that they had requested. And then also City of Bend and Commute Options for their programs, the Safe Routes to School program and the travel options assessment, education engagement, up to a maximum of about 10%. So, no. Also updates since the tax recommendation, we did get a couple public comments, one from an individual and one from Bend Bikes. Both of them were requesting to prioritize sidewalk info projects versus programs. And then Bend Bikes went on to give second priority to transit, asking for third to Safe Route Schools related programs, and fourth to the city's travel options assessment program. So we've got a couple funding scenarios for the board to consider. So the first one is the tax recommendation, and then including spreading some funding recommendations around. So what that could look like is for the first 2 years of Commute Options Safe Routes to School program, that could potentially be reduced by 10% in those first 2 years. The Bend Lapine Schools Pedestrian Safety Education Safe Routes to School program, that amount is their new cost estimate that isn't necessarily a reduced amount. That's based on their requested changes. And then with Cascades East Transit Microtransit Pilot Project, that would be 10% less, and that would be seen in that second year. And then for the city's travel options assessment, that would be 10% less in those first 2 years. And the remainder of this scenario is based on the tax recommendation. And if this were to be selected, we would potentially need to temporarily use reserve dollars in fiscal year 2029 to cover that potential $56,000. But then by the next year, it would be, or actually it wouldn't be 50, it'd be like 49,000. But that would all be dependent on when applicants requested their funding. So we may or may not need to do that.
So just to be clear about that, that essentially means we would pay back the reserve account following year.
Yeah. And then the second, so funding scenario number 2, that is again, the tax recommendation, and then a single reduction. And what that could look like is deleting the first year from one of the Safe Routes to School programs. We have a shortfall of 30,000, and that would cover it, and then leaving the rest whole. Or if there was a reduction, again, these are simply scenarios. It could come from somewhere else as well.
Since we have applicants here, can I ask a question?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Scenario.
Yeah.
For the commute options and the Bend Lapine Schools proposals, do you have a preference? I mean, would it be better for you to have a reduction and or elimination in a later year rather than early? Does it matter to you all in terms of?
You want to start first?
Sure, yeah. In the later years would be
better.
preferable for consistency of programming.
Mm.
We have staff currently available to start this project. And if it were delayed to fiscal year 30, that would give us a little more time to make that up.
Sure. Okay.
And for Bend Lapine Schools, our process or our request for MPO funds is new for the education and programming. However, the need is not new. So I would say our preference is the first funding scenario. Frankly, I mean, just being transparent, our first request would be the first funding scenario so that we could jumpstart the unmet needs and unmet priorities being addressed that exist today. If we go with not having funding in this first year, it just further delays addressing the unmet needs and priorities for Bend Pine schools for this program.
So essentially same answer, right? That you'd prefer if there is going to be a reduction, it's in it's in the later years, not the first years.
Well, if we were looking at only funding scenario 2.
So that's let me just be clear. My
Yeah.
question is about which year do you prefer it in? It's not about anything else. You
Yeah.
can add it, but I'd like my question
Yes.
answered directly.
To your question, the preference would be to delay it as well.
Okay.
So scenario 1 is your preference.
Yes, for Bend Pine schools.
Agreed.
And I would make the comment that, so the reason why we put together the single recommendation with the Safe Routes to School program is there were comments by TAC members that they had hoped that the 2 Safe Routes to School program could have been a combined application, but they couldn't come to agreement on whether one or another should be recommended less for funding. They've recommended both of them.
Andre, Councilor Mendez has his hand up.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That was going to be my question. I guess just to follow on the earlier comments, are there other candidates that could provide a source of revenue to fund these programs? And the second question is just to what extent are these overlapping or distinct or complementary? They're both safe routes to schools, but they're different. So are there any areas of overlap? If commute options and Bend Pine School District could clarify that, that would be great.
Yeah, I'll let them clarify that. I would say for one of the main things was the commute option Safe Routes to School was pedestrian and bicycle education. And the Bend Pine schools focused on pedestrian safety education. But if Brian, do you want to go ahead and start?
Yeah, sure, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go for it. Go
Great.
first,
So,
Mel.
Councilor Mendez, thank you for your question. I think overall, this shows the greater need for this programming here in Bend specifically. We've been able to provide high quality education to a limited number of schools, and this would allow the ability to expand into potentially all of the schools in Bend Pine. So since these 2 applications were submitted, we've been able to meet and collaborate on a plan of how we'd like to move forward with this. And so I think, there is an opportunity here to really reach more youth and families with both of these applications being approved.
And I would concur. There really have been some identified unmet needs to be addressed. And so having the support for both applications would allow us to address those unmet needs in a much more effective way. We have specific requests that are going unfilled. Since my arrival with Bend Pine schools, I've been out there working with the schools, and there's a lot of interest, a lot more requests coming in now that they know that there's somebody within the school system who is advocating for safe routes to school. And there truly are additional schools that are asking for education, and there just are constraints on the capacity right now that commute options have. I mean, they're doing a great job with what they do have, but being able to fund at a higher level would certainly enhance our ability to reach more schools and more comprehensive.
Can I ask you to be specific about which schools are not underserved, less served right now than others? And I want to layer onto that question, another question, which is, This is the Bend MPO. And this may be more of a question for staff. So the MPO has a specific geographic boundary. And the Bend Pine School District is bigger than that boundary. Well, in at least in one direction.
Right.
Are we talking about schools in the school district that are outside of the MPO,
I'd like to go ahead and address that.
outside of the MPO area?
So the schools that we're talking about specifically are within the Bend MPO area. So this is separate from the schools in Lapine. This one includes Miller. This includes Realms Middle School and High School. This is also including Ponderosa. And then that's just to start. Plus the existing schools that we're trying to serve have asked for more as well. And what I would say is that, I don't know if I would call it exponentially, but definitely the questions and requests are starting to accelerate. And so the needs, the unmet needs are not only going to stay where they are, but they're going to continue to grow as more and more word gets out that we have resources available and we want to serve those students and families. And again, within the Bend MPO.
May I add on to that? So historically, Community Options has served Title I schools in the Bend Pine School District, and also excluding high school. So we would like to expand into high schools as well. There's a lot of opportunity there to work with people who are choosing to drive for the first time or continue to walk and bike. So that would be my answer to your question, Commissioner Chang.
So I heard Realms, Miller Elementary, am I right?
Mhm.
Ponderosa Elementary
Mhm.
as targeted schools for expansion? Is that what I heard? Or
Well, I would say those are the
or new
ones that have
schools?
already requested
These are existing.
safe routes to school services that neither Commute Options or Bend Pine Schools can provide yet. Again, these are the ones that are just immediately known to me. However, there are other schools, some of the Title I schools that Brian was talking about, like Jewel, Juniper, and Derek knows Juniper. We were out at Juniper not too long ago. And then there's also Bear Creek. There's also Ensworth. So those are some Title I schools that would like more services than what we have the capacity to provide right now. But again, then there's even more schools within Bend Pine schools in the Bend MPO area that are underserved, that want more as well.
I have a question. I guess before you get too far down my question, I'm going to pivot us a little from the school discussion. That's it. So I guess, are there other questions?
You want to leave the school discussion?
No, well,
or
I had
or
a
you
question
wanna
for
kind
one
of-
of the other applicants, City of Bend, mostly.
or
On sidewalk infill.
are there, I actually may have one.
Okay, yeah, no, you go for it. That's why I asked. Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah.
Anyone else have questions or comments on the safe route to schools proposals? Boy, I'm having trouble articulating this question, but it's almost like a give a man a fish or teach a man to fish type question. So, I'm curious about the safe routes to school programming engagement with kids and families. Are you equipping kids at an early age with skills that then they carry and they don't need more support? Or are you engaging kids in non-single vehicle travel? And then to kind of sustain that, you need to keep supporting them in various ways. And either, both are good in my opinion, but it would be helpful to understand, which or both you're doing.
Well, the Safe Routes to School education program focuses on pedestrian safety. So teaching students how to cross the street, how to use our infrastructure, sidewalks, and do it alone as well, age dependent, of course, and appropriate. The bike safety education teaches students how to use our transportation system for biking. So it's all about giving them the quote unquote driver education to start them early and to understand instead of just being driven everywhere they go and one, not know where they are or how to get to where they're going, but also what are the rules of the road and how to apply them. So effectively, we're doing both of what you just stated. So we're providing them the education and the tools, but then also remember the city is growing, more and more students are coming into the school district. We've got new champions, new parents, and so it's a constant need for the new students. We start at K, so we're right there in kindergarten, teaching pedestrian education and moving all the way up into 4th, 5th, and beyond for the bike safety education. So it's providing those tools and resources, but also it's that engagement within the community. So not only working with the schools, but also who are the partners in the city that can be involved. Bend Bikes was mentioned before. They've been really instrumental in the walking and rolling to school days as far as walking school buses and getting kids actually doing the less SOV trips. So it's a combination of the two things that are occurring within Safe Routes. And Safe Routes to School is really a very comprehensive program that goes beyond just education and encouragement. You also have working with engineers, evaluating the program, doing equity work as well. And that's why we primarily focus on Title I. So looking at free and reduced lunches and who in the community really needs the resource. And I would agree with Michelle that there is a huge need here. And the more that we can provide, the better off we're going to be in the long run.
And so you can see my question ties to kind of like trajectory of program. Right. So, I mean, if you're producing more kids who don't drive to school and they need, then you need to sustain them and various, support and sustain them to continue that pattern of behavior forward, then your program is getting bigger and bigger over time. And then the funding need, I would expect to get bigger and bigger over time as long as you're being successful, right? So, which is it's not bad, but it's something to kind of keep in mind about, like what scale of a program is sustainable in the long run.
Yeah, that's a great comment, and I fully agree with that. And that's part of our application actually focuses on sustainability. So it's a train the trainer model. So working with PE teachers specifically to do the walk and roll safety education. So we're not consistently needed and it doesn't keep growing and growing, and it integrates it into the school, as well as the encouragement events and activities, working with champions at the school, fan advocates specifically that can help put these things on and create resources. So it's not just the program getting bigger and bigger, it's spreading it out and making it more sustainable for the entire district.
Yeah, for the entire community. And I would add that it's our goal is to get students as early as possible. I have a daughter who's grown now, but I remember vividly when she was in the school system in Corvallis, when the recycling program started in Corvallis. And I remember her going to this assembly, learning about recycling, and I would say, or Safe Routes to School, and bringing it home to her dad and I. And she set the tone for the household, right? And she got us recycling. And to this day, I'm a strong recycler. So I think that there are generational benefits. Yes, those students are going to learn it now and start applying it now, but they're also going to influence their parents and their grandparents. And then when they are parents, they're going to already have that lifestyle that's part of who they are and the community that they live in. And so it's just, at that point, it basically exponentially grows. So yes, there's going to be a certain amount of funding sustainability required to keep that up, because there is turnover, right? New people move to the community, especially in the Bend MPO area. There's a lot of people moving here. So there's going to be new people that have to be taught that if they're coming from areas that don't already embrace that. Plus there's an opportunity for grownups to learn new things as well. So we want it to, it's like an airplane. We need trajectory and then sustain.
Can I ask one other question on education just before we move on? One more is okay. Well, how much did we fund education the last time we did this? Like, what was the funding mix or funding amount? Or the previous years that are already underway and approved?
For Safe Routes to School?
Yeah, I guess this combination of stuff we're talking about, we have two proposals for Safe Routes to School now of roughly 300,000 or plus the original amount. So if we just look at that bucket, what was it? What has it been?
We did in the last call for projects, it was 3 years.
210,000. Sorry.
What was it per year?
70,000.
70,000.
All for commute options?
All for commute options.
For the 3 years.
Yes. Thank you.
Do we want to move on to questions about?
Yeah,
other
that's my
projects?
last. Sorry.
What?
Yeah, and I probably should have caught some of this in the homework, so apologize. But my question is why the City of Bend sidewalk projects weren't able to take any sort of reduced funding or offered to. And really what this question is going to go to is kind of more thematically, how do these things typically get funded, right? So what are typical funding streams for sidewalk infill projects for City of Bend? What are typical funding streams for Safe Routes to School, for commute options and the school district? Really, I think that's the broader question for me.
Yeah, and the answer is our capital projects with gaps or grants to date. And so starting this biennium, we have through the tough funding, we expanded our general fund funding options. We have the first sidewalk and bike dedicated funding. So going forward, we have 300,000 for this year and next year, and then it's 200,000 at least currently for the future. So that's with all the needs we have in the city, right? A very small amount of sidewalk. So any grant opportunity we have, we are trying to supplement that funding and build more. So and we are working on our own like new program prioritization system. We have for the biking and walking, we have the TSP with the bikeways and our key routes. And so we're trying to build and extend off of those. There's also some like vital gaps or whatever we're going to call them, where there's like one piece that's missing to connect people. And we're just trying to map and understand those a little bit better. And then the pedestrian side of things, we have a pedestrian plan we did that was a small subset of the city, and we're working on expanding that to the city. So we're working off the priorities on that list. So again, way more need than funding. And so the way, and that's a little bit to 6th Street, and the commissioner's question is, right now, 6th Street it was listed as our priority in the first round, because that's our first priority of our pedestrian plan, but that's one that we would fund within based on our priority ranking system, one that we would fund within our program. So we applied for the grant. If we got funding, that would backfill a lower one on the list. Some of the other projects are not on our priority system with how we're spending the funding, but they are a need raised by the community. Which reminds me, I should add, the other funding source was the Neighborhood Street Safety Program, which is funded through the GO bond and ending. So we don't have that continuing forward at this point. So those were projects that were like part of that, kind of raised through that. So the Butler Market, the median that kind of gels with finishing the corridor. So that's why we were able to fund that. The 6th Street American Lane and Boyd Acres don't really rank in our priority system. So partially funding those like doesn't quite build the whole link. So that's why we said we kind of need the whole amount.
Okay.
Does that answer?
Yeah, I think so.
These proposals do reduce the Butler Market because they eliminate the crossing.
They eliminate
portion.
those.
Yeah, so we kind of met where we could and kind of had.
More than half. It went down by more than 50%, right? Because it was 310, now it's 145.
Median crossings are, I think, around 165,000 to 200 each, depending on the quotes we get. As you well know, it's more expensive than you think it should be for median, but it's an isolated project.
Absolutely. And kind of same question for, thank you, Janet. Same question for Safe Routes.
So traditionally, this program was started here in Central Oregon through ODOT's Transportation Safety Office. They have Safe Routes to School funding for technical assistance across the state, infrastructure for building projects around the state, and also the education portion. And that's what we're talking about here is the education portion. So ODOT TSO, Bend MPO, the City of Bend, Community Options has been able to secure funding through Central Oregon Health Council, St. Charles and other private foundations, and even smaller grants like Target to buy helmets to give out to students.
And so the ODOT Transportation Safety Program, Safe Routes to School program is providing some of the funding for the education.
Currently, it's providing funding for Michelle's position right now.
Okay.
We part of that program for such a long time that we are now ineligible to apply for that funding due to their criteria. We could apply for it, but we would score low. We had that funding for about 20 years, and they wanted to move it on into other available opportunities around the state. It was awarded to Bend Metropolitan specifically. And they're coming up with new criteria right now for the next round of funding. We plan on applying for funding for Redmond specifically. There's been a lot of need and we have contacts up there that are eager to get this going up there. So that's the current layout and structure of how it's funded.
And you'd be able to qualify as that new program if you were working at Redmond.
Correct.
And to Brian's point, ODOT is funding a part-time role. So my role is part-time, not full-time for the school district. So we're trying to get the biggest value for very few dollars. Not that my services are not invaluable, just kidding. But yeah, it's a part-time role. And so my role is funded with a small ODOT education grant. It's called a Tier 1. So when next spring, ODOT will open up its Safe Routes to School, grant program again for construction and technical assistance and education. We will apply for the education grant again. It'll be considered a Tier 2 because we've already done the beginner Tier 1 because the school system has found value in started that institutionalizing of the program within the school system. And again, that's part of why I'm here is to help create more engagement and outreach with the schools so they start asking for help and asking for the services that I talked about earlier, which it's working. It's working. They're asking and we need money to fund it. The other thing that I would say, but will apply, that doesn't mean that we'll be awarded. It is discretionary, it is competitive. So we may or may not get that Tier 2 grant funding. But that's not the purpose of these dollars. Again, this is to enhance and actually do the outreach and services to the community. It's not to fund my role. And the other thing I would say is that I too am looking for other foundations and grant opportunities because Community Options and the school system, we partner because we really want to serve the community. We have this shared mission. And so, what's good for Community Options is good for the school system and vice versa. So we want to raise the tide for all ships, right? And so the other thing that Bend Metropolitan Schools is experiencing right now is that the state school funding model is tied to the federal school funding model, which is going through cuts right now. So the state school funding model is going to be significantly impacted because of the federal cuts coming. And so Bend Metropolitan Schools doesn't have additional money. We already didn't have additional money, but now we have even less to be able to provide these services. So we are hoping for this support so that we can partner with Community Options to provide these services to more schools and families in MPO, and just ask for your support. Thank you.
I have a capstone comment.
Okay.
Kind of to address both of what you're talking about. So the city also has added funding to Community Options. We're fortunate that we all work together to try and get all the schools covered and not duplicate work. And so as part of that transition, the city, the last 2 years has funded and will fund Community Options going forward. And now that we have staff also being able to focus the effort, we're working through our list of schools. because as we're also building infrastructure, to your question, like infrastructure changes, right? So the safe routes to school map changes because now we have a route that directly connects and we need to do some education. And so we can do some of the engineering and even some of the rides and events, but that's what Commute Options does so well. So we rely on them working in the, in the schools and doing the training and events. So going forward, we plan on including them as part of our program. And so as you've heard, there's not like if we all piece together, we can probably cover all the schools and adding high schools was a big push for us as well, because we see an opportunity to get more people on their cars.
Can I ask a follow-up? Does that mean, so is the city's funding for Commute Options increased then?
It increased because it was zero. And so
Oh.
now we have last year and this year carrying forward the same amount.
Same amount.
2 years, yeah. $40,000
Okay.
a year.
Do we historically fund, like, so I know we're looking at 28 to 30, for the last 3 years. I mean, was this a similar breakout in awards?
The last
For project types?
5, 6, and 7, we had about the same amount requested as we had available, but we had Commute Options and we did have as far as the types of projects, I'd say they were somewhat
Similar.
similar.
So we had sidewalk info and the like.
We had more bike
Hmm.
infrastructure. But yeah, we had some infrastructure programs.
Okay. And
And I don't know that we had funded a transit one previously in 5, 6, 7.
No, we have in the past,
Yeah.
but not in the existing timeframe that we're
Okay.
operating on now. There's.
Yeah.
no.
And I guess a question for Bob, are you still on for CET? What does the 10% reduction look like for you as far as the reality of being able to deliver?
Can you go back to the previous slide, Tyler?
Yeah, so I mean, it's not going to be the difference whether we deliver or not. I would, I'm certainly willing to take one for the team here, but I would also note that, just because, and I mean, this is from my previous MPO history, just because people apply doesn't mean everybody should get funding if the scoring is such, and I haven't seen the scoring behind the scenes other than the ranking, right, is putting a couple of the top ones at such a high priority because it meets the criteria, right? This was the discussion, for the last 10 years is we get a lot of applications because it was a unfettered money source, if you will, that it could be used on a lot of things, but that doesn't mean it should be priorities for the MPO discussion. It really should meet back to some of the values and priorities we've set. Grandstanding aside, that, like I said, that reduction in the second year is not going to be the reason that Deschutes River Woods microtransit fails or not. We'll find some way to make up that difference.
Thanks, Bob. So I think the comment for me, and I'll stop now after this, is, this seems like, I think Bob's getting to it, right? It seems like a pretty free and clear funding source for like what it's going to get used for. And my concern is the city of Bend has multiple paths to funding sidewalk infill, right? And it's important work, it's important infill. It's obviously some of these are highly ranked. But I don't necessarily see the same path for Commute Options, right? And given that we're an MPO, we have that flexibility. To me, that's something that like CET and Commute Options should be things that we're prioritizing. If like, hopefully I'm phrasing this in a way that makes sense, right? I live right in areas that are impacted by sidewalk infill. My kid just started riding a bike, pedal bike, no training wheels last weekend. So I'm pretty stoked about that, right? But it's like, I would also, like to see the city prioritize those things, and be using this as support and maybe not there to fund full-blown projects. And so like, when I'm looking at these large, obviously it's going to cost every cent of that and more to get it done. And that's what's tough for me. We've sat at this MPO, right, and also discussed the tough and where that's going to be allocated with David Abbas. And so just thinking about that, right, thinking about how we can be using this money for things that wouldn't otherwise be funded. And I'll touch a little bit on equity, because that is a criteria on here. I hate to be the guy to say it, right, but all of these projects are on the east side of town, that are now coming down to MPO, right? I would prefer to see the city take a hard look at funding, east side bike ped, without, hinging on a vote here for that. It's been a topic recently, and I think it's just something to consider. So just noting that too, putting my hat back on and shutting up. So thanks.
Please, thank you.
Counselor has a question.
Counselor Mendez?
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick question for Bob. The Chutes River Woods microtransit pilot project was the highest ranked, and I think with good reason. But it's even so, it's 120,000 proposed in scenario 2, I think, and 60,000 in scenario 2 for FY29. So what does that look like moving forward? I mean, are you anticipating additional funds from somewhere else to keep providing this service, or is this more of a pilot project that we can get off the ground and hopefully demonstrate demand for? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, part of the issue is, and we've talked about it, Counselor, is the the big unknown right now. The intent of this pilot project would be to front some money. We could front some other money, keep it going before we really know where the payroll tax was going to be. That was the assumption, that we had a temporary increase, right? And then this would keep us going beyond the temporary increase. Now, not even knowing about the temporary increase, certainly this is a priority for us to find alternative funding. I really can't predict what that means for the outer year now based on where we are. The strategy was, though, to front this project, keep it going, even if the payroll tax increase sunsetted. This would help us get another year beyond what we wanted, but that's an unknown right now. To make up the difference would be our stiff formula funding.
Thanks for that. I think, so to Commissioner Chang's earlier point, I would like to see, maybe in the form of a brief report from the successful recipients of these grants, some kind of estimated car trips that were replaced with these programs. My sense is that some of these education programs, safe routes to schools especially, are a very good investment. For a few tens of thousands of dollars, we're not improving the capacity for people to drive, but we're actually making it easier for everyone else who still needs to drive, because we are taking cars off the roads. So I'd be curious to see that in the future, just because in the last couple of years, I think we've demonstrated just how successful these programs are. We've heard from crossing guards at schools like Bear Creek that 3 years ago they had 20 kids walking or biking, and now they're up to 75 or 80, and they're talking about they need a new bike rack because they're running out of capacity. So that's fantastic, and I think really demonstrates to me how successful education programs are in tandem with the city's effort to actually address things like safe crossings and safe routes. I do want to push for the city. I will push for the city from my position to consider things like alternatives to sidewalks on greenways. I want to make the whole greenway safer. We hear that there's still too many people driving down these routes. They're using them as cut throughs. So I'd like to explore using things like traffic diverters as opposed to, I think a sidewalk is really important, but I think a sidewalk on a greenway is different than a sidewalk on a collector or an arterial. I would say my preference would have been for scenario 1, because it seems like all the applicants are amenable to that, and it leaves the MPO in the black. It looks like scenario 2, we still have to, I guess that's a question for Andrea, is whether if we go with scenario 2, is the just
The
looking at that.
scenario 2, so I didn't, because, I was saying, delete the first year from one of them.
Yeah,
then that would, actually, we would have an additional,
I
say,
see.
20,000 in the black.
Okay, so just hypothetically, if we went with scenario 2 and we'd still be looking at deleting one of the years from the safe routes to schools, I guess I want to hear, we wouldn't necessarily have to delete the entire year of funding. It looks like there's, maybe 15,000 or 20,000 left over there, 19,000 something. And that would kind of just put us at 0. From either of the applicants, is there the prospect of, if we went with that 3rd year and just had a partial funding for that 3rd year, would you be able to find, are there any other sources of funding that could make that 3rd year whole? Or would that mean, no, it's probably not going to move forward in that 3rd year?
Well, I would say that we will certainly continue. If we had less funding in year 3, we would optimize utilization of that funding to keep the program going as long as we could, and do our best to find other sources of funding to plug that gap. At this moment in time, I'm not aware of any other options for doing that, but we would certainly continue to pursue other opportunities to fund that gap, because we very much believe in the program. And having that shortfall in year 3 buys us more time to find other funding sources if they exist.
Another alternative for scenario 2 is to actually reduce the CET portion by that amount that was talked about in scenario 1. So take it down to 160, and then we need to find $13,000 more to get to a 0 number in the lower right-hand corner. And that could be what's taken out of fiscal year 30 for those other 2 projects. So it reduces the portion, the reduction is smaller, and I think we've heard some flexibility from CET to fund that program.
Okay, I'd like to ask a question about the CET project. Struggling to figure out how to ask this as well. Bob, what gives you confidence, or some degree of confidence that this is going to work? Like, this is a new thing. You got your CET route, and then you're kind of like extending off the end of it in an unusual way. I mean, it sounds like a novel project, a pilot, right? So what kind of evidence from other places, experience from other places, information that you've collected from people in the vicinity, in DRW, like what makes you think this is a good bet or thing to try?
Yeah, Commissioner Chang, fair question. First off, it's in all our long range planning, right? It's not just, this isn't a spur of the moment, let's serve them in our 2040 master plan. Everything of all that outreach and everything showed the need for transit services in DRW, and it's specifically called a micro mobility, micro transit option as a viable option. So, that's the backbone. The other points are based on equity mapping, 5,000 people in that area that don't have any transportation needs right now. We know there's needs just based on other areas in Central Oregon that have similar demographics and their usage of transit. As far as how do we know it'll succeed? I just twist that around and say, like, how can we not try this when it's the largest population in Central Oregon that doesn't have access to transit, and it's the highest on an equity score from age, minority population, income, and all those things. Like, we're failing if we don't serve those, so much that even if funding was limited in the future and not knowing, my preference, and I think, it would be other other elected members and sub's preference would be to serve this area instead of some of the areas we serve right now. And so, yes, is it going to be challenging from an outreach and getting users? But we get a lot of requests now to expand that area, a model where we, at the same time establish a temporary hub on the south end. We add in the housing around Murphy to access our bigger area. I think there's a lot of key measurables that'll be successful there compared to similar situations we have in other areas in Central Oregon.
So can I add on to that, Phil?
Sure.
So I think the other value for me is that this is kind of, it is experimentation and trying to do some innovative stuff that hasn't necessarily been tried here quite the same way. And I think there's a lot of value in us learning and experimenting, and maybe it fails. Okay, I think that's okay. I don't think we should necessarily have to go in with full certainty something's going to succeed. That's part of the challenge with having an effective transit system in a place that some extent is under-resourced, not to some extent is under-resourced, and funding challenges broadly, and the kind of, we don't always have the right density now. And so we've got to try new things. And I think that this helps us do that and gives us enough time to actually learn and then apply it.
Right.
And
no, and I'm not trying to cast skepticism. I would love to support something with evidence or data behind it, right? So I mean, our health services department at the county, they are constantly coming up with like, this is a whole new way of delivering service to a critical need, and we know it's going to work because they did something like this in a community like ours over here in Missouri. So I'm just kind of grasping for that, but I absolutely hear long-term goal, a critical need, best professional judgment that this is the strategy that has the best likelihood of success in serving that need. I appreciate that. I can.
Yeah, just to add that, this gives us the most flexibility. We already have the buses. This is 2 drivers' wages. We already have the operating system from a data on demand service, right? This is extremely fluid. I'm not making guarantees, but we'll have more than enough riders. It'll be, are we comfortable with the expense of the system to serve those riders, right? It won't be around getting riders. It'll be around, does this, hey, they call, we pick them up at their door type of system actually work out there, or should we quickly shift to something else that's more economical? You said for examples, right? I think we know Oregon development laws. There's not a lot of Deschutes River Woods, Crooked River Ranch in other states with development laws. So it is hard to predict how this will work, but just based on numbers, when our ridership is 75%, what we would say qualified for fare reductions, low income, age, all those things. And this has the highest percentage of those populations. That's the data points, Commissioner, that I would hold to, that's who uses transit in Central Oregon. So, based on a number, could we be a little more scientific on what we think the usership will be there the next couple of years? We certainly can with our survey next year and other things, but this will be an area that has and already has shown a lot of user requests.
Right, and the way you're describing it, Bob, it's if there is a lot of data collection and analysis along the way, then this is in some ways the study that I'm looking for, right? So it's not just we're trying this. It's we are doing an experiment, and there's going to be valuable learning that comes out of this for us and for other communities.
Yeah, and we do have evidence of micro mobility. I mean, certainly we have our own trial run that was a little different, right? As it's serving a different population that we tried in Bend a few years ago. But throughout the country, there's different micro mobility options. There's certainly a lot of consultants who have, spoken with me about it and advancing that. So we do have that system to fall back on, and that's why we're presenting what we are, and we have some model work done already just around how we think we'll operate this. So it's not, to your point, it is a trial for us here, but we're just expanding on some systems that have been successful, not in this same scenario where it's a development on the edge of town, but in these similar functions where, hey, we're serving an area with this type of route instead of a fixed scheduled route.
Thank you. And then I guess my other question about this project is, I'm not feeling optimistic that HB 3991 is going to survive this referendum effort, and is a year and a half, as if that looks like what you've got programmed here, a year and a half, and then kind of whatever you can cobble together from what within your STIF allocation. Is that enough money for long enough to do the experiment, the trial that you want?
Yeah, and in fairness, and it's written clunky. We think this is the last year and a half of hopefully a 2.5-year trial, right? Our intent is trying to front the money now. To your point, a lot has changed here. We thought we were going to have some additional money to, prompt this. Now we may need to move money, but the intent is for us to, fund this sooner than later and use this funds as the second year, to get to 2.5 range. You want to get through a couple summers is the point in any of this, and you want to have enough run up into that point so that there's education and marketing out of the way, and you're not experiencing that during your trial run.
Thank you. More questions, comments, discussion?
Well, it sounds like we've got these two scenarios, and Councilor Riley had also proposed a sort of a modification of scenario 2, I believe. But one proposal, I mean, we've heard how important I think the Deschutes River Woods microtransit project is. If we're looking at scenario 2, one possibility would be take the existing proposal for scenario 2, but allocate the residual amount for one of the fiscal year 30s lines there for either commute options or Bend Pine School District. And that would be one possibility. Does anyone want to put forward other possibilities or ideas?
So Counselor Mendez, what you're saying there is take that 30,000 shortfall that we're showing there and deduct fiscal year 30 from one of the safe routes to schools.
Yeah, so if we have a shortfall of 31,335, I think one possibility would be fund fiscal year 30 for commute options at 18,645 or Bend Pine School District at 17,880. So one of those would zero out the funding, one of those options. So that's one proposal. Does anyone want to propose something different? And just to be clear, I really struggle with this because I do feel like my own thinking on education has evolved. I feel like I've seen how successful it can be. I used to be kind of a infrastructure first person, but education really does work, and we do have a lot of great routes, but people need to feel confident that they can find them. And this really, I mean, it's successful. So I feel like I hesitate to not fund it fully. But seeing that the needs are great here, I feel like we do. One thing that Janet Ruby didn't mention also is the city does have a proposal to fund more of these kinds of small infrastructure infill projects. That we passed an amendment to shift some of our funding from paving to safety programs, but there's sort of an asterisk on that amendment. We do have to come back and clarify whether it was to fund for 1 year of our biennium or both years of our biennium. So we haven't come back to that yet, but I do think the city will have more money for this in the future. At least I hope we do. Not a lot more, but it would be a little bit more that I think would help with this. So know that I hope that's still coming for this from the city side.
I mean, my only alternative to what you proposed, Councilor Mendez, was to split the 31,000 between the two programs, between commute options and Bend Pine schools, and sets them up a little bit with less of a gap to have to fill. That's just
It's still in year three,
King Solomon's solution.
but still in year three.
Yeah, still, and shift the cut to year three, the reduction to year three, so that there's more time to plan for, allocate resources, find other opportunities for funding. Maybe the city come in and backfill if we're successful around resources, that kind of.
So, I mean, if other people are feeling similarly or thinking along the same lines, then we're basically still looking at scenario one, setting aside scenario two, and now we have a scenario three. That seemed right.
See, I thought we were just talking about scenario two that's up there. That's what I was referring to. That's what's on the screen.
Just a modified scenario too.
The way that scenario.
With the modifications.
Okay, so the way that scenario two was originally set up was the reduction would go in the first year
Yes, so move it to the second year, right?
or the third year. Okay.
Choose one of the programs to reduce or split the reduction between the two. And I'd probably I'd advocate for the second, splitting between the two.
Are there other scenarios on the table right now? So we got scenario one, we got modified scenario two. Is there anyone who still wants to keep scenario two original on the table for consideration?
Well, my understanding is scenario two is not really viable by itself as presented. Is that correct? Because it has a deficit.
Right. Unless we're gonna use.
No, you,
permanently.
Andrea hadn't assigned.
Right.
Where you were gonna take 31,000 out of. Yeah.
I see, right.
In the scenario two that's on the screen, it could come out of one or the other or both. But that would have balanced it, made scenario two balanced it. I mean, if you completely eliminated one of those first years, then it would actually put scenario two in the black, $15,000-$20,000. But I think that we've modified scenario two significantly, and that I don't think that anyone is still looking at scenario two original. Now we're talking about a modified scenario two where we would get 31,000 out of one or the other or both of the safe routes to schools educational programs in the third year. Is that?
That's what I have written down.
Can I make that motion?
Well, I mean, so we got those two scenarios, right? Just let me make sure that there's not other thoughts among the policy board. And I mean, you could make the motion, then we could talk about whether scenario one or scenario two modified is better.
I move adoption of funding scenario two with the following changes. That we eliminate the deficit of $31,335 by reducing funding for commute options proposal and the Bend Pine school proposal in fiscal year 30 by 1/2 of that amount, so roughly $15,000 each. But more than that.
I second that proposal, that motion.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Discussion?
So I think just to clarify, half of 31,355 is 15,677.50. So if we said
1.7 and 1.8.
commute options would be fiscal year 30 funded at 15,000. So sorry, it would be funded at 34,328 if that's 15,672. And the Bend Pine School District fiscal year 30 line would be 33,564. which is 49,235 minus 15,671. Andrea, are you making notes?
I see that Kelly's got notes here.
Okay,
Yeah, we've got it.
Yeah. we have
okay.
it.
I think that sounds reasonable. Like I would be happy to support either of these agencies in their efforts to find additional funding for fiscal year 30 and leave it at that for now.
Okay. Any more discussion? I mean, one piece of this chart that we haven't discussed yet is the City of Bend Travel Options Assessment, Education and Engagement piece. Scenario one provides $4,000 less than scenario two modified for that project. I would like to ask if, if that is one of those multiple potential funding streams that could cover that work, that allow you to absorb the $4,000 reduction.
That is currently the only funding stream. We're just starting the program. We have staff and now we're looking for different funding options for it. And that is one that if needed, we could scale to the funding that we have. It's targeted mostly at supporting, like we have this new infrastructure. Let's do things kind of a different version of community options, right? To engage and get people using the new infrastructure that we have.
And I would add the intent of that is if that funding were awarded to the city, that the city would contract out some work to Community Option to do pop-up events around new infrastructure projects. So a partnership would be with Community Option, similar to what the city's doing with the Safe Routes to School. So there's a partnership there. All of that money wouldn't necessarily come to the city. It would be contracted out for the events and the education piece. So Community Options does get a little more out of that $60,000. It's not all going to the city event as proposed in the application.
Any more discussion or?
I mean, Commissioner Chang, if are you proposing a modification or?
I wanted to at least poke at that $4,000 before we made our decision, but I'm pretty comfortable with that response. Should we go to a vote? Okay. So calling the motion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Abstaining? Motion carries. Thanks, everyone, for when you have limited resources to allocate and there's lots of good projects to do, it's always a difficult discussion. That seems like a pretty good solution, thanks to the TAC and to the team for teeing that up for us and getting us pretty close to a final decision. And thanks to the MPO policy board for getting us the rest of the way there.
I'll be right back. I'm just running out to my car.
And I would like to say thank you to Bend Pine Schools for that support. Very much appreciated.
Right. Item number 6 on the agenda, Bend Transportation Data Program.
I will turn it over to Jesse Thomas. Actually, I will stop sharing. Why don't you jump in, Jesse?
Yep, 1 second. Let me just get the presentation up here.
While you're doing that, I'd echo the thank you and say it's also insightful just listening to the discussion of as all of us are trying to tease out where do we focus resources on and what can get us the biggest shift and change. It's not easy, and you can hear all the different opinions and thoughts and experiences. So we'll continue on with the same discussion as we move forward.
Got to just get the,
Thank you.
always hard to kind of hide stuff.
And now we're gonna get more data,
Yeah.
data.
So, let's see here. That's okay. I'll go through it just like that. So, a little bit about myself in the Office of Performance Management. So my name is Jesse Thomas. I started at the City of Bend about 13 years ago. Moved into community development as a performance analyst and really helped work with that department to build out their data and analytics that they use when looking at review times for buildings and just the total number of volume and things that they do and help them really understand the type of work they're doing. About 2019, myself and several others in other departments, we thought, hey, you know what, we want to scale this up and look at this from a city's perspective. And so we formed to create our own department. And what we do is we look at how we support all departments, including transportation mobility, including MPO and what they're looking at. And what we think about is how can we help everybody make data-driven decisions as they're working through stuff. And we look through that in the lens of, I would say, of people, process, and technology. And knowing that in any one of those three categories, if you have a gap in those areas, you potentially have bad data. And if you have bad data, you're potentially making poor decisions off of it. So we're structured in a way that we have our GIS department is within the Office of Performance Management. So that's our geospatial analytics happening there. We have a division around, and sorry, this isn't this slide specifically, but we have a division around kind of our tabular data and databases. So if you think of more like financial data, different things like that, we have a group that focuses on that type of data. We've got a group which is called our Spark program, and that is around continuous improvement. So looking at where can we find efficiencies within processes and helping people understand data. So a lot of education in there. And then we've got another group, kind of like the fourth leg of the stool, which is around asset management. And that's kind of where this program falls a bit in that. And now this group is around asset management and analytics, but this is also happening for the most part within our GIS system as well. So that's a little bit about us. Today, I want to just talk about a transportation data program, kind of where it's been, where we want to take it in the future here. We'll talk about kind of what that looks like, where we think it'll look like in the future. And then there will also kind of weird coming on the heels of this last discussion and ask for support in terms of funding and stuff. So just take a minute, everybody kind of read through the, or to look at this question. And then maybe if I could just get a couple people to help answer what you think about it. But what happens when you make decisions around transportation where you don't really understand what's happening with the system and thinking about it from how people are moving around the city and stuff?
Waste money.
Okay, waste money. Yeah, that's great, right? You want to maximize your efficiency for a lot of different ways. Anybody else? Councilor Menendez, you just jumped on, so.
I would say less confidence in our decisions.
Exactly. So both of those are great examples, and there's so many more. I think Janet could just pretty much run through a whole bunch of stuff as an engineer thinking about that. And so why does that multimodal data matter, right? So the infrastructure investment side and the maintenance guide, and Janet's talked about, we've got these huge gaps. So as Commissioner Chang says, like, where are you spending your money? What is the most bang for the buck when you're thinking about stuff like that? On the safety and enforcement side, how can you coordinate a lot of those activities using data to find out where you have kind of maybe some of those, maybe you've got a bike lane, but you also have high speeds right next to it, right? And you have like conflict in different types of modes and stuff like that. We think about it, and it matters a lot, and we're really getting to that performance and behavior side. So just because you build infrastructure doesn't mean people are going to use it, right? You need to really understand what is happening with that infrastructure after it's built. And when I say that, it's not necessarily thinking about it from like a traffic pattern or different things like that. You build a street, cars will use it. You know, you build bike lanes that aren't connected to anything, you probably aren't going to expect a lot of usage in those bike lanes. And so how do you think about it from a systematic approach? And so all this really helps us kind of think about supporting our broader goals. So we've got a whole bunch of things up there, but we've got, when we think about multimodal data, we're thinking about how to support and manage a lot of the CFEC rules that are coming down. We think about meeting last week that Tyler and I were in around TSAP, right? And thinking about that Transportation Safety Action Plan and the information that all of this information feeds the evaluation of your TSAP. You know, we think about, and then the long-term side, just kind of thinking about it, all this information eventually feeds into our growth plan, right? Our plans for 20, 30 years out. And what are we doing to plan for multimodal infrastructure and activities when we're talking 2050 or farther out with that? And this information and building this program helping us kind of get to a point where we have really quality data to help inform that and measure our success, you know, probably after none of us are working for the city or the county or a variety of areas, and helping those future groups kind of move through things. So currently where we're at for our multimodal counting, we have a variety of different ways that we get counts. We have working with Janet, she helps produce our May counts, which is a point in time count that we get done every year of our actual vehicle counts. We have some other items around that are used less, that we can pull data from, but the data is there. When you think about a private development, a lot of times we're asking them to do some sort of traffic analysis, and we're getting counts or different things happening in there. And we've had a multimodal program for some time, but with just not enough resources going to help it build and help it be sustainable. And so as individuals have left, it's been harder to kind of backfill and find out how do we keep this going. And so we've had some limited success, but our vision for the future is to start really thinking about it much more comprehensively than just counts and stuff. So we want to pull data from a variety of different ways and integrating a lot of that data from stuff like police data. So when we're thinking about crashes, when we're thinking about potentially speeding tickets, variety of things like that. We have, you know, wanting to integrate connected vehicle data. We have things such as our Bird and Veo scooters downtown, and then through mobile apps that are out there where people are using an app to do some sort of activity. They've opted in, right? As now everybody has to opt in to share your data. So they're willing to share your data. And for a lot of municipalities, we can get a login to get anonymized aggregated data from those apps, as long as we're using it for municipal purposes and we're not necessarily publishing it out to the public and stuff. So a variety of different areas. We want to collect all this data, bring it in there. And then the last thing is really thinking about it, and we've, you know, in the previous discussion touched on it, thinking about it from an equitability standpoint, right? And so we want to start layering in a lot of our census data, understanding our different users, different groups throughout the city when we're thinking about that, and what are their diverse needs, and how do we understand, you know, those different communities to when we're addressing infrastructure gaps. Okay, I asked Tyler this the other day. And sorry, I've actually changed the title of the slide compared to what he is, but can anybody name the 7 E's when it comes to transportation safety? Janet, you get to be excluded because you probably know them off the top of your head. And Tyler, you should remember them from last week.
I know
So
most.
you want to give them, go for it.
Enforcement, education, engineering, emergency services,
Equity.
equity. There's 2 more, right? So.
I'm forgetting.
They were on an earlier slide, I think. Or maybe.
Yeah, you got them all. So we're missing what we got. The one we're talking about is evaluation, which is the last one in the 7 E's is evaluation, right? That's what this program, yes, exactly. The one thing this presentation is about is really about evaluation, right? How do we collect all this data and understand what is happening with our various systems and within our transportation system? So kind of looking with this slide, the intent is to kind of say, and I touched on it a bit previously, is you've got to take all that diverse data that's coming from a lot of different areas. It's not just putting some tubes on a street every once in a while and counting those, or having somebody, as it relates to Greenwood and that recent project, sitting out there with a clicker, just counting, right? That collects data, but it's point in time data, right? We have different things that happen at the system. We have different usage at different times. So how do you create that complete picture, right? So we'll look at that connected vehicle data. We're going to start procuring that coming up at the City of Bend. Part of that is, and we know that not all vehicles are connected, right? So if you have a connected vehicle, that means if you're basically built from about 2005 and on, those vehicles, your vehicle has GPS, and that information is fed up to the manufacturers of that vehicle. So you can get volumes, you can get speeds, and kind of some of that real-time behavior happening in there. And then you can create data models to help scale up a little bit and do the estimates for what the missing non-connected vehicles are. So we're gonna go that route. We've got, and we're working through that, building out those models. Again, we touched on looking at our demographics and looking at individuals around the city and how they're using the system or what those types of users are, and kind of looking at their mobility needs. This program is going to help us try and understand a lot of pattern behaviors within that as well. And then so you take all this data, from a technical term, from our group, a bunch of analysts, we mush it all together, create a data lake, right? All these things are streams of data coming into a data lake. And I'll touch on this in a little bit, just kind of give you a visual of it. You mush it all together, and then this can produce a bunch of reports. We have a better understanding of what's happening there, creating a set of tools that can be used by council that we intend on sharing with other organizations. So CET or the county and others had questions, helping them out to try and understand the types of things that we're seeing, the schools and others, to really have an understanding of the evaluation side of the 7 E's. So where are we? So back in 2024, September, Janet and Tyler and I looked at a policy that I'd written, just kind of describing the roles, the intent of the program, timing, and kind of, does this make sense going this direction? We kind of settled on a spot, and we're saying, okay, so now we need to move forward with that. And since then, we've been doing a lot of data and technology process assessment. What are the things that are happening? What's working? What's not working? We have some good data sets out there. We said, hey, this is awesome. We're going to keep this going in our data lake. We've had other data sets. We've kind of been like, not great. We're going to have to kind of pull it off or out of our program and figure out how to make up for that gap. Working with the various departments to be better at our internal processes of getting our as-built information, about getting our striping. When we are building assets, or we are kind of doing that maintenance process, make sure that we have good asset data. We're at a point now where we have really quality data. So for instance, as it relates to the climate-friendly equitable communities, we had to ship off all of our transportation asset data off to have somebody review it and say, what is the quality of that? We got it back and they said, you're not missing anything from our perspective. And how they did is they were basically looking through pictures and they're saying, is there a crosswalk there? Yes. Do you have a crosswalk in your asset data? Yes. Do you have the age? Do you have all the different things to have good data? They came back, they had nothing. There was nothing from what they found, their analysis, that we were missing. They just said, do you want to maybe also maintain the private asset information? We're kind of like, we don't really have control of that. But I think for CFEC purposes, when we're thinking about certain areas, yeah, we'll maintain it for that. So we know we're really good in terms of our data. And then we reviewed our technology. And that's where we're lagging behind a bit as well. So a lot of the permanent counters or our temporary counters that we put out, they've moved on from that quite a while ago. And that's what we have. They're not the best, but it is also one of the reasons why we've had to take data and say, we can't use this because it's not accurate, because the technology is not great. And so we have had to pull it off. So that helped us kind of move to our switch. So if you guys have looked up when you're driving over Portland Bridge, we've got a permanent counter up there. We're using our machine learning models to count our bike, pedestrian, and vehicle traffic that are going over the bridge. We'll be installing another camera as it's part of the Franklin corridor project that's coming up to look at getting our counts again, to very accurate counts of our bike, ped, and vehicle traffic there. We're looking at replacing our permanent counter on Galveston and with another camera. And then I've worked with our engineering department. So in the future, as they're doing large CIP projects, if it makes sense, we'll be adding permanent counters around the city as well to try and get our accurate counts with that. And so the great thing about that type of technology is we can get a very accurate count because we can test it. We can manage our machine learning algorithms to make sure our counts are accurate. And then we can use, so for instance, on the connected vehicle side, we know what our actual counts were that day and at that time going over the bridge. And then we can look at our estimated numbers and tailor those things so they're much tighter tolerances with that. And so where we are here is I have a technology request ultimately to help build out our program. It's to move away from the tube counters and go more towards video. Again, using video where we have our machine learning doing the counts for us for bike, ped, and for pedestrian as well. Those are the three keys that we really want to do. And we're looking for mobile counters specifically, ones that we can move around based off of priorities that will work with Janet and other departments to have an understanding of what's happening where. So if you think about it, we may want to move them out when there is if they were going to do some sidewalks work. So let's put it out there. Let's do some counts. Let's see who's using it and who's not. Then let's go do the work. Let's see what's happening afterwards and thinking about that pre-post, thinking about, I think when we've talked, Janet and I have talked about how do we look at what our counts are for safe routes to schools, getting it out there, trying to get an understanding of those who are using the system. And then kind of moving on is we have the next big part is by the end of our fiscal year, the city of Bend's fiscal year, which is in June, we need to have a transportation model that looks at our assets, looks at our usage, looks at land use and a variety of other things to help layer and prioritize projects. Because we know we have a lot of projects, as Councilor Menendez was saying, it's like we got a lot of projects out there. You don't have funding for them all. So how do you kind of do that first level of triage to say, we're going to highlight these projects to get done first because it's going to open connectivity or it's going to fill a gap that will hopefully get more users to use it. And then again, it'll produce a whole bunch of stuff, more than we have funding for. And then we're gonna have to look at Janet and we'll have to look at the rest of the staff and say, great, we have money for maybe 4 of those 10 projects. Now, which ones are we gonna look at and try and figure out how do we do that? And kind of work through this to create this model to help do a lot of that kind of what I would call first level transportation triage to figure out where do we go from that. And that's related to where we need to go for our budget. It's related to council goals as well, because we have a council goal of reducing crashes by 10% in this biennium. So, are there specific spots that are hot spots that we would need to work on and figure out? And so we want to align it with a variety of different things. All right, this is a very poor representation of what this multimodal kind of data plan looks like, and where you have on the left-hand side, you have all these data sources, and this isn't all of them, coming in, and they all need to be standardized. You need to anonymize the data, and you need to get it into a database that you can start doing math on, essentially. So when we were talking about that model that I was just talking about, it's got to look at this data within this, and it's got to start doing that first math for us to look at. And then from that, it's going to start building a lot of those tools that we can get out to different people or different groups within the city and others so that they can start using that information within their decision-making process as well. Again, so the real world kind of applications that we're hoping to get from this is, again, we know where we have gaps in our sidewalk now, right? There's just too many to kind of fix all at once. So how do we triage and kind of work through what are the most important, right? So that pretty easy item there when you're thinking about it from an infrastructure planning process. You know, again, I touched on like maybe we can prioritize some of our bike lane stuff based off of types of usage or when usage is happening. So again, think about it in a couple different ways. Maybe we work on restriping it when we also know there's not a lot of people using it. B, we think about it as where do we have those conflicts again, where we have speeds, vehicle crashes, and a variety of other things that we can then say, okay, we've got issues here. Is it an infrastructure issue or is it a behavioral issue within, say, like vehicles and drivers and stuff? And then that kind of leads into that. Great. Now we're working with police. They are waiting for us to help start producing a lot of those tools for them so that they can say, great, I have limited resources with the number of people that I can send out for patrol. So where should I be going now? Or maybe where should I hit regularly until we start seeing some of those behavioral changes when it's not an infrastructure related issue that's out there. And then again, and then wrapping around on that equity side in that investment. So if we are investing dollars into adding new infrastructure and doing these things, are we seeing those patterns change? And, you know, when we're trying to maybe open up certain parts of the community, is that working again? And we do that through these counts. We do that through understanding the behavior and what's happening in our different transportation systems. So where we're at right now, so we are working the city of Bend. So my department, Janet's department, and our engineering department have agreed to split to get some of that connected vehicle data. That is kind of top tier where we want to go with stuff, because again, that's where we're going to get excessive speeds, high volumes, help us really identify conflicts in a variety of different areas right up front. And it directly will feed into that enforcement area that we're talking about. I'll skip kind of the mobile counters here. And then we got the permanent counters again, where I've talked about, again, we've got Portland Bridge, installing the Franklin camera coming up. And we have this kind of, and then there's this connectivity each year. It'll cost us about $1,000 to kind of run that connectivity. So the 4G, things like that, as we work with that. And then the gap that I have a problem with, where we don't have any funding, we're trying to figure out what to do, is in those mobile counters. Again, upgrading our current technology so that we can catch up to get actual counts. And why this is so key is you see a lot of this data is really easy to get, connected vehicle data. The hardest thing to come by is your bike and ped users and the counts around that. No one has been able to crack that nut for a long time. And I think, you know, in talking with Tyler and last week around the TSAP, the only way to do that is actually get out and count and try and figure out to do that, and building a program around doing it regularly, looking at these areas to get trends, right? Point in time stuff is awesome, but you need to look at trends over time. And again, if you don't have this, you're going to have to use vehicle data and say, okay, if they're speeding, then you have a safety issue, right? That's what you have to assume. And so the mobile counters that you can get out there and get the actuals, that is really key in that decision-making process. And that's where we have a bit of a funding gap, where 2 counters will cost us about $17,000 to look at. I can easily budget and afford the annual total of the connectivity side for $800 for the 2, but I'm looking for 17 grand for that. So that's where I'm at right now, but I'd like to open it up for questions for everybody.
And I'm going to apologize. I let us get behind. So
I'm trying to go quick.
we are past the anticipated end of this meeting already. So let's just check to see if there are any questions and see if we can wrap this item up pretty quickly.
Okay. So what specifically these counters are cameras?
Yeah, so basically we can bolt it onto a sign, or we can make it freestanding. It's a camera, and then we have our machine learning algorithm running, doing the actual count.
I'm assuming
real time at that point.
So what's
don't know yet. We'd have to go out for RFP, and I don't want to ruin that.
okay? And then when you say machine learning, that's what you're paying for annually?
So we have a variety, we have it ourselves. Actually, we do a lot of it in-house ourselves. And then we have, depending on the vendor, they have stuff on theirs as well.
It's $800 a year. Do you know how that is structured? Is that in perpetuity? Is that contractual?
That's in perpetuity for usage of it for the connectivity side, which is somewhat close to what we've been paying for Eco Counter when we're looking at our mobile counters or permanent counters that we're currently in the system with that.
Okay, and then what, like specifically, what are those cameras looking at? Are they purely counting vehicles or are they also collecting?
No,
the whole suite of
so
data?
in this case, with the 17 grand, so the ask is for a camera where we can run our machine learning algorithm to count vehicles, pedestrians, and bikes.
Are they collecting any of the other data that, like, so you had the data lake slide, right?
No, they are not. Yes, so on the data lake slide, so they would just be kind of looking at, these would be kind of more or less like these physical stations that are doing these counts right there.
So
And then
if you go down one slide from here. So like, what do these cameras provide to you out of like these? Right?
Yeah. Yeah, so this would be where I would say this is kind of getting our pedestrian infrastructure, bike lane, and helping with targeted enforcement would be like the keys for this. So specifically, when we are getting let's say we've positioned it because we want to do a study on, say, the Wilson corridor, what we're looking at, and specifically, let's say we're looking at, because it's the buffered bike lane specific type, we would be positioning it so we could count our we would get vehicles as well, we would get pedestrians, but in that case, we might be looking at just collecting our bike information, the actuals for that, what's happening on that corridor regularly, so we can have an understanding of those patterns, that usage pattern that's there. The traffic side is less important, but I might as well, I do want to get actuals all around. So again, so I can work on our other machine learning algorithms to make sure that those are more accurate over time. So.
Yeah, and I would say from the MPO side, we have, we work with ODOT to maintain the travel demand model that's utilized for capital project planning and stuff. We're transitioning to a new software program over the next 2 to 3 years. The existing travel model that we have is really good at doing vehicle estimation. It's super poor at bike and ped estimation. This new model will have that ability for us to be able to better understand bike and ped movements within the community. And as we build that new model, as you build any model, you run it, look at what kind of numbers are being generated, and then you calibrate it against existing data. And so some of the count data that will be collected through this process, we can then utilize in that calibration process for travel modeling.
That would be the intent, is to share a lot of that stuff when we're connecting with this to help everybody with the calibration side is key to make sure your models are correct.
Any further questions?
Well, there's a request for some money. Where would the money come from in terms of MPO budget?
It would come from, we have, it wouldn't be reserves. We have funding in our consultant line item that's not allocated to specific projects at this point in time. That's the only place it can, meaning it either come from there or from reserves.
And then how much is in there that's not currently allocated to projects? Is it 100,000, 25,000?
Yeah, it's well over 100,000.
Councilor Menendez.
Yeah, thank you. I think we always hear about the need for better data. And so I think this is great. My question for Tyler is if you could just say a little bit more about the MPO's role in managing or supporting this kind of data collection. I know we've had websites in the past that have had data, kind of even a data dashboard, but it, very quickly falls out of date. Is there an opportunity here for the MPO to support this kind of data collection moving forward, or is this more of an aberration?
Go ahead, Jesse, and then I'll.
So part of our role in OPM is to actually directly support the MPO and their data needs. And I think the plan moving forward would be to make a lot of these data sets or those dashboards of reporting that the MPO needs, help them with the analysis, work through it, and then make it evergreen so that that information is available always. And then we're helping to provide the back end support of the data and analytics side for them so that while they're focusing on a variety of different things.
And I think Counselor Mendez, just following up, I mean, there is a history of the MPO being engaged in this. We worked jointly with the city in the past to secure the funding for the old permanent counters that are still, I think they're still sort of working, you know? And we actually had staff that would go out into the field and help maintain those things, download the data, do different things. We had our own web page up for a while, utilize some of that data. It was a lot of work, right? You know, and I think we've always been looking for kind of a bigger permanent solution. And I think I'm hoping
That's what,
where we're
yes,
going.
that's what the
So
program.
that we
builds
can,
next.
yeah, we can help feed into it and support it, but it won't be something that, you know, us as a 3 FTE entity with a flat, you know, what's looking to be like a forever flat kind of budget, you know, we can rely upon, we can help feed into it and pull data from it, but not manage it.
I would add the difference, Counselor, from where we started was there's a crash data, some volume, and then these bike ped counts were all sort of proprietary systems through grants that were individual. Since then, we have Jesse and his department, and the city's been converting a lot of our stuff to GIS, and that evergreen, I think was the word you just used. So now we have a system that is kind of more universally used with GIS databases and moving forward with the new technology so that it would stay and last, and it's supported one integrated infrastructure instead of one that does this thing and one that does that thing.
Is
Thank
there,
you.
oh, sorry. Is there transparency with this data? Is this available, the output of what these cameras are recording, as well as machine learning? And also, how would you typically pay for this if it wasn't for the MPO?
Yeah, so real quick on the first question with that. So yes, most of this data will go to our open data platform that we have at the city, making it available for everybody. When it comes to some of the app data, there are restrictions around sharing that publicly. So not everything, but most everything. So when we're talking about the counts, a variety of things like that, yes, available to everybody. The algorithms, the machine learning algorithms with that, yes, somebody asked for it, we would have to provide it. It's part of in records requests, anything like that. We're probably generally not just going to put that out there for somebody to look at through our Python code or a variety of ways that we're looking at it. And then to answer your second question, which was, remind me what that was.
How'd you pay for it?
If we didn't have it, then I would wait for another budget cycle to go through and ask for funding. So it'd be another several years before we got that. Any further questions?
Yeah, I have a question. I have a question. I was just wondering, you're asking from the MPO and there's unincorporated areas in the MPO. And this is not included there. Is that correct? Because
That is correct. I think that we've always been under the assumption that our support for the MPO, and this would extend beyond, a little bit beyond, I mean, are not going to be able to go up to Redmond and do a variety of different things like that, but thinking about,
or two more.
Yeah, but we do have shared system. So when we think about from a transportation's perspective, you know, we have, state highways or state run areas that are happening within the city of Bend itself proper. And so we would be sharing across with that in all those areas.
Okay. If there's no further questions, is there a motion?
I move approval of 17,000. Is it 144 or 244? Your slide said 2, but this says 1.
Yes, sorry, I got an updated cost. Okay.
So I move approval of $17,244 to the city of Bend to purchase 2 mobile counters.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I'll oppose this one.
No. And any abstentions? Okay. Motion carries. You got the counts on that. And we can move on to other business. Are there any updates from board members, policy board members? current projects or planning efforts, requests for future meeting topics.
I'll just say two items. I think that your pessimism about the referendum on HB 3991 is well placed. It sounds like they've collected a significant number of signatures, and that would mean that all of the funding that had been approved would be put on pause until November 2026. So I'm not sure whether that means the legislature will have another opportunity to try to address that in the short session. And, I guess we'll know at that time whether the signature gathering effort was successful or not, but that is not good news for well-maintained winter roads or other road maintenance, and certainly not good on the transit front either. Tyler, I did want to ask you just to say a little bit about the Transportation Safety Action Plan. I feel like this is an opportunity for us to really underscore the importance of that work. Basically, the City Council has a goal of 0 fatal crashes. And if we think about that in terms of, we see an average of 4 or 5 fatal crashes every year in a sort of average or typical year. It fluctuates from year to year, but this is our opportunity to save some of those lives. So any time that we spend on better understanding those opportunities, I think is well spent, at least from my perspective. So anything you'd like to share on that front would be great.
The only thing, it's the project's up and running. We are going to be really kicking off the public process in January after we have passed the holidays. And I think one thing I would ask of both of the city councilors that are on the board right now is we are going to be bringing pretty major updates into the full policy board here. We've been trying to get time on the city council agendas for at least 2 and maybe 3 check-ins in 2026. And if anybody has looked at city council agenda, it's filled out all the way to August, I think, at this point, and so we are struggling to find any time in the first 7 or 8 months out of next year to even get before council. And I think as a staff person, this is a critical project that's MPO is leading it, but it's going to ultimately really come down to the city allocating funding through its CIP towards projects and programs to implement what comes out of that plan update. So any lobbying that the 2 city council members can do to city staff would be appreciated.
Have you proposed, like, these are the topics and roughly when we'd like to do them?
Yes.
Can you share that information with me that's been proposed?
Yeah, I can do that.
Anything else on the TSAT?
No, that's all.
Maybe share it with Councilor Mendez and I.
Right. So our next meeting of the Bend MPO Policy Board is December 19th, 2025 at 12 p.m. Noting that for everyone. Do want to provide an additional opportunity for public comment now at the end of the meeting. Anyone online? With that, then is there any reason we shouldn't adjourn now? No? Okay. Thank you, everyone. Meeting adjourned.
Thanks, everyone.